Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friend Sam Clement. Sam, say hello.
Hey, John. How are you doing?
Sam, I'm doing fantastically here. It is the week in between Christmas and New Year's, and it's that time of year, Sam, here at Trading Perspectives, where we get to put out some predictions for next year.
That's right.
And you know, some of our predictions, actually a lot of them came true last year. You're just going to have to go back and listen to old podcasts to see exactly what I am talking about there. But Sam, I'm just going to go ahead and get the ball rolling right here, and I'm just going to throw it out there. Something that everyone's going to be talking about. It's kind of boring, but you know something? I'm going to tell you right now. My prediction for next year is the Federal Reserve starts cutting the overnight lending target. They do it no later than the May meeting, and they do it by no fewer than 4 times in calendar year 2024, taking the upper range of the overnight target down to at least 450 by year end.
Just sounds so exciting.
Doesn't that sound exciting? I mean, would you disagree with that prediction?
No. I would maybe the lowest. If you said 3, I would be 100% on board.
Yeah.
I'm still, there's just so much that's going to change it. I think 3 seems pretty easy. I mean, that's at least what the Fed is saying, and they've undershot and overshot, and so
well, I'm going to stick with the 4. You say 3. But what you're essentially saying is you think the futures market might be a little bit ahead of itself. Currently predicting 6.
I think probably, and then not to get too into the weeds, but you have to start asking why they're going to be cutting rates, and some people are probably thinking it's because the economy is going to fall apart. Some people are thinking it's because inflation is going to undershoot even that 2% goal next year, what have you. So I don't think the economy is going to do bad at all, personally, not to skip ahead. And so I think 3, 4 probably makes sense.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm going to stick with 4. So there you have a 450 and 475. Okay. Now, the next one, you mentioned economic activity. And Sam, I'm going to say this. U.S. economy starts off the year at a little bit cooler than how we ended 2023 with a 4.9% reading for the third quarter. At least that was the third stab at it. Then probably like a 2.5 to 2.7 for the fourth quarter. And I think at some point all this negative stuff just is going to come home to roost. I'm not forecasting sort of major recession, but when we take a look at it, the decline in the monetary base last year, M2 down about $700-800 billion, the inverted yield curve, which has slowed the extension of credit to a degree, really just caused it to collapse for all intents and purposes at the start of the year. But then, take a look at, credit's there's not a lot of growth in loans and leases. Then we take a look at some of the regional economic surveys, the old PMIs. They're horrible. And then finally, one of my favorite, the Conference Board's leading economic indicators, been negative for 20 consecutive months. If all that stuff no longer matters, then we need to quit doing it. I still say it matters, and I think we start off the year probably with 1 handles on the gross domestic product report for the first and second quarter.
Yeah, and I think right now the average estimate for the entire year is about that 1.5%.
Yeah.
But the estimates have been very wrong for a while. Going into 2023.
People were worried about a recession.
Right before the market bottom, the charts kind of look similar if you look at the chart of expected GDP for this year in the stock market overlaid from the beginning of 22 to now, and that bottom was around that kind of end of the third quarter of 2022, and that at that point the market was expecting 0.3% GDP this year.
Well,
awful.
They got it wrong.
Very wrong. and I think my prediction is that they get it wrong again this year. I think we're going to have above 2% GDP, which is, I guess, above long-term growth potential, or at least that's what the textbooks would tell you right now. I think we have another strong year. I think the consumer's strong. I think there's going to be some tailwinds, and I think we're going to see that through the year. But I do think the first half, in terms of the market, it's going to be choppier than the second half.
Well, that's for all intents and purposes, that's what my prediction was. I do think once the Fed starts cutting the overnight rate, that will give a little bit of wind in the sails. And the second half of the year is probably going to be a little bit stronger than the first half. I think probably by the time you add it all up, stick it in your blender and pour it into a glass and put a paper umbrella in it. You know what I'm talking about.
I do know what you're talking about.
Perhaps
pina colada or
something like that. Probably see GDP grow between 2 and 2.25, with the growth coming with the strongest growth coming at the back half of the year. That's what my forecast is. So it doesn't sound like we're directionally all that opposed on that.
I don't think so.
No, don't think so?
I don't think so.
All right.
It's still early for those average predictions. So, but I think we're on the right track.
All right, I am going to go out there right now, and this is a caveat. Anything that we say is political here at Trading Perspectives is just my opinion, Sam's opinion, not necessarily those of Oakworth Capital Bank or anyone else associated with Oakworth Capital Bank. So here's my prediction. Sam, the presidential campaigns just absolutely demoralize the American population, and by the time we get to November, if it is the two current front runners, voters will believe that they are playing a game of Russian roulette and won't vote for anyone. They'll vote against the opposing party. Your thoughts on that prediction?
You're leaving out RFK and the No Labels Party. Yeah, I mean, it seems like that's the third candidate is just like you just don't want either of the other two, really. And I'm not sure that's going to gain much more traction than a Perot type did. But nonetheless, yeah, I think you're seeing a lot of people just kind of fed up with octogenarians with mental questions leading the country. Leave it at that.
That was Sam.
I'll leave it at that.
That was Sam. Now, Sam, I would say in terms of this prediction, if there is any margin for error, if there is any potential for error, I guess I should say, I would say it's more on the GOP ticket. And I say that because I wouldn't be surprised that the longer a Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis stays around, the longer they can stay around. Haley getting some key endorsements. They do well in New Hampshire. They do well in Iowa. A lot of the people that are out there saying, "I'll vote for Trump because I think
can't vote for Biden."
Yeah, I'm going to vote for Biden. I think a lot of those people that are out there saying now that they'll vote for Biden could end up saying, not voting for Trump. I do think that they might go, I'm not in love with Trump, and there's some energy going on.
Yeah,
I do think there's some potential for that. However, the former president's lead right now in the primaries is just so great. It's very difficult to make a forecast that either Haley or DeSantis can take it. But I do think there's a potential for it.
Yeah, I think Nikki Haley's the only one that has a chance really at this point. It's kind of shocking how much DeSantis has fallen off after being kind of the golden child for the party. But I think you do need to see that consolidation maybe from some other candidates and really have it, like we were talking about with Biden versus Trump. I don't like him, but I can't vote for the other person kind of thing. Maybe you start to see that if there's some consolidation in the party. And you're right, endorsements coming in, money coming in more. But it's always tough to estimate.
Cooks, the Sununu's.
Yeah, it's always tough to estimate where Trump is going to actually come out because he consistently outperforms his polling. And it makes perfect sense too. He's the one.
So mind-boggling.
He's the one candidate though that people may lie. I feel like and say, of course I can't vote for him, and then go out and vote for him.
And then they pull their red hat out of their back pocket and put it on in the polling station.
But you get what I'm saying. I mean, that's the only candidate I can see that someone would lie and say they're not voting for him when they actually are.
So, well, we'll see. It should be a depressing turn of events next year.
Is that a prediction? You have a depressing 2024?
The older you get, the more cynical you get, the less enthralled with politics you get, the more depressed you get at all this nonsense. All right. One of the campaign topics, I think, which will come to the fore, is the United States' continued assistance in Ukraine. We're already starting to see this here at the end of 2023, so this might be very low-hanging fruit, but I do believe that this is going to become a major topic, with the Republicans really essentially saying, we're done, and the Democrats saying, we're not, and it's going to reach a fever pitch until all of a sudden I think Zelensky is going to be very scared that his access to 155-millimeter artillery shells and drones and all kinds of good stuff will be dwindling by the time we reach November.
Well, if Trump wins, he said he'd solve the war in 24 hours. So I guess problem solved on that front. I'm not sure. I'm not sure
The man can do so many things.
I'm not sure the logistics of solving it in 24 hours, but nonetheless.
I mean, so what do you think? Do you think that's going to become a topic of conversation?
I do. I think the Republican Party is still split on it, and I think it'll get more and more tied towards other bills, whether it's the border, I think, is going to be a big one.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see some tightening up of the budget or of the of the money we're giving to Ukraine.
Okay.
Pull that back a little bit, that portion of the budget, and try and either offset it with something else or pair it with something else that Republicans want to spend, because the Republican Party still seems pretty split on this.
They seem split on a lot.
Yes, and it's getting more and more split, kind of into two sects, I would say. So we'll see what that looks like.
All right. Now, I've made all the predictions thus far. I can keep going unless you've got something.
Let's hear it.
All right. Okay, we talked about monetary policy. We talked about politics. We talked a little bit about the economic activity for next year. I guess you got to talk about the stock market.
Yeah, well, that's what people care about when you talk about the economy for the most part.
You had to listen to this.
We had to get through those first.
You had to get through those in order to get to this. I think it's going to be very difficult next year for the stock market to have do as well as it did this year. It's going to be very difficult to have an encore. I do think we'll have a positive rate of return in the stock market. Typically, that's what happens when the Fed starts cutting the overnight rate. You see some multiple expansion. Economic activity will be slightly better than a lot of people fear. There should be a slight boost for profitability. However, with multiples already a little bit stretched and with corporate profitability probably not growing 10-15%, I think we can very easily see sort of upper high digits on the overall S&P 500 with value outperforming growth more than likely. And so people won't be getting the 14 to 15% sort of balance type returns that many of them will see in 2023, but I think a return to probably a good old fashioned 6 to 7, maybe 8% on a well-managed balance fund is what investors should hope for in 2024.
Yeah, I at least directionally agree. I think I may be a little more optimistic. And I was really
wait a second. I thought you were the world's most cynical Gen Z.
Apparently, but I was right about being optimistic on the market this year.
Why don't you claim it?
Well, but hey, no one else is gonna brag for you. So you got to, and I'm gonna
listen. I've been doing this for 30 years. Trust me, I know.
I'm decently optimistic on next year. I think the easy bet is everyone's gonna say we're probably not gonna have as great a returns as we've had this year.
Wait a second. You just shut down my prediction right there. I mean, I'm just trying to make it sound like I know what I'm doing.
But I do think we'll have a good year next year, and I think it'll be for several reasons. I think it'll be first, like you mentioned, with rate cuts, and I think you have to understand the why behind rate cuts. Because there's times where rate cuts aren't good, and it's because it's in response to an economic collapse. I don't think we're going to see that. We've already covered that guess. We think we're going to have some decent economic growth next year. And this year we had no earnings growth. It was less than 1%, really. And I think we're going to have better earnings growth next year, looking from a top-up kind of approach and looking at names. I think we'll have some earnings growth. I think we'll have some rate cuts not due to economic collapse. And that, to me, kind of sounds like equity nirvana. And I think it's, again, not necessarily like we experienced this year, which felt, whether it's the start of a new bull market or not, it felt like that, and that you had these big swings, these big up and downs, and a lot of pessimism around the rally pretty much the whole year. I think next year we have maybe a little bit smoother returns. I think we can probably get into the double digits.
All right. So directionally, basically the same. There are probably some people out there that are, I know that there are some more major firms than ours out there predicting sort of stock market Armageddon next year. I just don't see how it goes.
I think you gotta dive deeper on those names. I mean, the big banks that are predicting that, their biggest clients are largely hedge funds in terms of the commissions that they're making. And hedge funds are largely leaning more pessimistic. So they're kind of, I would argue, they're kind of selling their book a little bit.
Well, that's typically what these firms do. And then, the thing about it, so much of the outsized return of the S&P 500 really did come from those big seven names in tech and communication. It's very easy for me to envision those things not outperforming quite so much next year, or potentially underperforming, and perhaps that's really kind of what they're talking about, not understanding that shrewd investors like perhaps our friends at Oakworth Capital Bank, who have already started shifting away a little bit from the big seven and more into value names, it probably will do better than what the naysayers are saying.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen over the last couple weeks, that's exactly what you're saying, and I think that trend kind of continues. We've seen the equal-weighted S&P be negative up until the end of October for the year. So again, really almost 2 years of pretty tough performance outside those 7 names. We've seen that kind of reverse since the beginning of November, and I think that's something we'll probably see continue next year. So completely agree.
All right, another prediction that we have, or at least I have, is that thanks to the Fed rate cuts next year, the dollar should weaken a little bit against other major trading currencies or reserve currencies. The ECB, the Bank of England, and others will start cutting their overnight rate too, or their equivalency thereof. But even so, the dollar should come down off its lofty perch on which it has sat for a better part of 10 to 15 years. Not calling for a collapse in the U.S. dollar, just enough to give a little bit of a boost to things like commodities, perhaps small cap stocks, and then also international investments, at least a little bit, but more particularly commodities here in the United States. And that's where I think that's what I think is going to happen. It's going to give a little bit of a boost or a little bit of a floor for things like the energy sector, and which, by the way, I think reports of the demise of the fossil fuel industry in the United States have been greatly exaggerated, and we will find that more and more in 2024 and 2025 as we find out that American consumers really just don't want the electric vehicles, at least to the degree that the administration wants. And by the way, we can't produce them with enough efficiency anyhow. That is a long prediction, Sam.
That's several.
Yeah, that's several of them, but
kind of wrapped into one.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, well, you tell me what you think about it.
No, I agree, and I know what you mean. I'd like to add on to weakness in the dollar. We're not talking about a collapse in it. There is still too much demand for the dollar. Yeah. It is still the reserve currency. We're talking about kind of relative weakness
3 to 5%
with other
decline,
major currencies.
3 to 5% decline.
Yeah.
Something relatively minimal, just enough to give a little bit of a floor for commodities.
Yeah, so completely agree with that. Commodities, the demise of energy, I completely agree. And I think to add on to it, kind of slightly shift, I think we'll continue to see a bigger focus on those hybrid vehicles rather than full electric vehicles.
Well, listen, I think that's a great idea.
I do too. I would get a hybrid. It'd be a much easier decision than to get a full electric vehicle.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, another prediction. I think maybe moving away to something a little bit more mirthful, I guess. Maybe not mirthful if you're producing this stuff. But I think the trend that we saw in 2023 is going to continue in 2024 as moviegoers across the country stay away in droves from the next comic book movie and from the next prequel and the next sequel, and really start demanding perhaps a little bit greater creativity coming out of our so-called creative forces. All you have to do is take a look at a lot of the bigger flops this year. Things like the Marvels and Wish and the latest Ant-Man movie, which you probably didn't even know came out, The Flash, and a number of others. I think maybe the bloom is off the rose with movie studios just churning out the same old, and it's really coming through in terms of the box office.
Yeah, it's we've talked about it in several different podcasts about this, just reiterating the same concepts, the third, the fourth, the fifth of these movie series.
Hey, Furious 10.
Yeah. And
I got it after the 20 minutes of the first one.
And I saw,
kind of figured it out.
Yeah, and I saw already a lineup of sequels that are supposed to be coming out next year, and it's like there's 20 of them already, and I haven't even heard of half these movies.
I didn't know what Ant-Man was.
Yeah, but half these movies I haven't even heard of, and they're on the fourth iteration of it, and so it has. You would think it would have to change a little bit, but I don't know the profitability of these movies, and maybe it's just almost like layups to these companies. They know what they're going to spend, they know what they're going to make, and it's not going to blow it out of the box office, but they're going to make a pretty solid return, and maybe that's the case.
They've lost a lot of money on some of these issues.
So, again, I don't know. I would hope this would die years ago.
I think what's going on really with a lot of these comic book movies and the like is they're going back to the same well.
Yep.
The same well. And I guess that same well is a certain demographic, probably heavily skewed towards males, I would imagine. That's not trying to be a misogynist, but probably a 60-65 sort of type split. 60 to 65% males, 40 to 35% females are attracted to, Marvel and what have you. and then probably heavily skewed to people under the age of 35. Now, the reason why that's important is because you keep on asking these people to come back and see the same movie, then you're going to stream it in 6 weeks. I haven't been to the movie theater in a long period of time.
Yeah.
Beth and Annie went to go see a movie called The Boys in the Boat, something that George Clooney or something. It's in any event. They went to go see that yesterday, and by the time they got popcorn and soda and all that stuff, it was a matinee of $66, $62, $65.
It's a nice meal out for two.
Yeah, something like that. So I mean, it's kind of a commitment, and to keep on giving people the same thing over and over again while asking them to drop a lot of money. I think we're going to see that trend continue until we finally get some more creativity back in Washington.
I agree.
Not in Washington, but Hollywood.
I agree.
We would certainly love to get some creativity in Washington, by the way, as well.
That'd be nice.
All right, moving on to sports.
Think the O's get a World Series?
I don't think the O's get a World Series. I think last year was wonderful. Winning 100 games for the first time, I think, in 40 years was fantastic. Team played great as a team. I don't know if it was lightning in a bottle, a flash in the pan, but I think it's going to be hard-pressed to repeat that next year. But the prediction that I was going to have, or I do have for next year is, and this is going to be shocking to a lot of people, the Los Angeles Dodgers will not win the World Series.
Oh, I 100% agree. I don't even think they win the NLCS. They're going to lose to a team that squeaked into the playoffs with 85 wins and get swept by a 24-year-old rookie pitcher, and that's what happened this year. It's going to happen again. Time is a flat circle, as they say. Yeah.
So there may be some people out there saying, hey, you just got Ohtani, you already had Freeman, Betts. I mean, it's veritable murderer's row. You throw Ohtani in the lineup, maybe not on a 4-day rotation. You put him on a 6 to 8. That shores it up with the rest of the studs they have out there. How could they not win?
How could they not? How could they not last year? How could the Mets not do well?
Well, that's just. I mean, it seems to me time and time again. Just because you load up a team with an enormous amount of talent doesn't mean that they're going to win championships.
Nope.
All right. Do you have any predictions now?
The Rangers winning the World Series back to back is my big one for sports.
All right, closer to home, and everyone that listens to this knows that we are in Central Alabama. I will tell you this one, and some people will like this, some people will not. Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers surprise to the upside next year, winning at least 9 games, and it's going to be a fun next 4 years down on the plains for the Auburn Tigers. Sam, your thoughts on that?
I agree. I'm optimistic. Wish I was down there for the next 4 years.
Listen, my son John, who's graduating in May of next year from Auburn, is pretty depressed. So, Sam, here we are. We've gone on well over our 20 minutes that we like to keep this podcast to. We've covered a lot of different topics. Really, I'm kind of struggling to think of anything else that is pressing, top of mind. All that good stuff, all that bad stuff. I guess maybe if there was one last one that people would want to hear is something about the situation in Gaza. So that will make that the last prediction for this year. For this podcast. What's that?
I said, oh man.
All right, here it is. The situation in Gaza ends up obviously with Israel taking out most of the high command. However, they don't completely eliminate Hamas, which escapes to fight another day. However, Gaza is left in complete ruins, and the United States will pick up some of the tab, but not necessarily all of it. Israel, already a world global pariah to some degree, will become increasingly more so, and actually the administration's support of the Israelis will become a millstone around the neck for the administration, for Joe Biden, as a lot of younger viewers are pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel, and it's going to be a difficult thing for the administration to slough off. Not that these people will vote for Republican, they just might not vote at all, and as a result, I think maybe the world ends up a little bit worse for the wear. After the dust settles, all the smoke clears, Israel's not as safe as it once and has lost or has expended a fair amount of political capital in defending itself. And the United States emerges perhaps not as solid as ally as it once was. Now, how about that? That is a long prediction.
That is a long prediction. I think the Saudis will play a major part in getting this settled. I think decent chance Hamas leadership gets exiled to a country that they're friendly with, and we'll see a deal that's largely good for the Israelis, but probably not as happy as some staunch conservatives there would like it to. But I think the Saudis will play a big role in this and the rest of the more developed Middle East.
And they will continue to struggle with one another.
Yep.
As was foretold.
As was foretold.
All right. Now, with that, guys, thank you all so much for listening. We always love to hear from you. Also, if you have any comments or questions, please, by all means, let us know. You can always drop us a line or email at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. As always, if you're interested in reading more or hearing more of what we have to say or what we think, you can always go to oakworth.com, take a look underneath the Thought Leadership tab, and find all kinds of exciting information, including links to previous Trading Perspectives podcasts, links to our blog Common Sense, links to our quarterly piece, Macro and Market, and all the individual components thereof, as well as links to some good stuff from our friend Mac Frazier and others in our advisory services department. By all means, go out there and check it out, play around with it, and hopefully you will like what you see. With that, Sam, one last chance to give a insightful prediction for 2024.
That's all I got.
That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.